against COVID-19. And for us to start the proceedings, I would like to invite the Chief Minister for welcome remarks. The Chief Minister, please.
Your Excellency, retired Brigadier General Dr. Julius Maada, President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, colleague ministers, our development partners, senior government officers present, members of the press. It's my privilege to welcome you to State House, and in particular to welcome our development partners to the second strategic interface meeting between the government of Sierra Leone COVID-19 response presidential task force and our development partners within the DEPAC framework. So as you already noticed, I'm standing in for the Minister of Planning and Economic Development to facilitate today's meeting with His Excellency the President as Chair of the DEPAC framework, but also as Chair of this event. So today's high-level strategic interface meeting on the government of Sierra Leone COVID-19 response will focus on three key issues. As you see on the program itself, the first is really an update on the government of Sierra Leone COVID-19 response and intervention, in particular highlighting the successes and challenges. And secondly, a focus on the transition from COVID-19 emergency response to post-emergency recovery, and this will focus on two aspects. The first aspect is the impact of the recent Ebola outbreak in Guinea and the government of Sierra Leone preparedness response. And secondly, the opportunities for health system strengthening and the post-COVID-19 recovery phase. And the third focus of today's event is the commitments of the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccination program. On that note, it is my privilege, ladies and gentlemen, to hand you over to His Excellency the President to chair this DEPAC event. Mr. President, please.
Deputy Ministers, our donor partners, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. For our partners, this meeting is of special importance. We've been part of the coalition in our response to fighting COVID. In as much as we are not entirely out of the woods, we have fought a good fight, and some of the major objectives of our fight have been achieved. Reducing mortality and also making sure that livelihoods were not compromised. You have been an integral part of this, and we are reaching another important, significant milestone, and we thought that you should be informed before we take that step. Of course, we tried to prevent the introduction of the virus into Sierra Leone. We knew we were fighting a losing battle because of the interconnectedness of the world today. But we tried. And when we failed, you were all part of the many processes and procedures. I had to go around to put in place structures, and at the national level, we did not only put together a national architecture to fight off the COVID, we also put in place measures. But in all of this, we made sure that our actions were guided by data and science. Today, we've reached a point where we can say that we are going towards the end of this particular fight. We have received the vaccines from the People's Republic of China. We have received from COVAX, and we cannot roll this out as partners without us informing you, and that is why you are here today. On behalf of the people of the Republic of Sierra Leone and myself sitting here, I want to thank you for the many challenges you've had to endure with us in fighting off in our response to COVID, the support that you've given in terms of PPEs and many other technical support. And we are very proud of the partnership between us and our donor community in Sierra Leone, and that is why you are here.
This is ambassadors and other international partners present. Good morning. My presentation will cover basically the successes and challenges of the response so far, and the other detailed presentations below that will be covered by my colleagues, Dr. Austin Denby. Will be covering a part of the transition from the emergency response to post-recovery, focusing on the impact of the recent Ebola outbreak and government's preparedness response. And Mr. Sheku Barura, who is my deputy at NACOVAC, will also be addressing the second segment of that transition, which was a little bit about health system strengthening in post-COVID-19 response phase, and also briefly talk about the financing of all of this and where we're heading. That will be followed by our colleague, Dr. Tom Sisei, who will be talking generally on the COVID vaccine rollout plan, which I'm sure our international partners would like to be comforted with, to know that what you will benefited from your efforts in putting structures and plans in place to deal with it properly as required. Now, as we all know, well before the first case in Sierra Leone, the government of Sierra Leone, led by His Excellency the President, have started looking at our structures and systems in place to see how far we have prepared, for the COVID virus. By early March, many parts of the world have been faced with the ravages of the virus, and we knew that it was just a matter of time until we get on to Sierra Leone, as has been alluded already by His Excellency the President. So we wasted no time to go around the country. His Excellency visited several points of entries to assess the state of available infrastructure in the following areas specifically. We went to 34 Military Hospital. His Excellency led the team to 34 Military Hospital. We went to Lungi International Airport and some land crossing points. COVID-19 response has been run against the overarching environment of a national state of public health emergency proclaimed by His Excellency the President of the Republic on 24th of March. By that time, we had realized that we need to come out with this state of public emergency. 34 at the time was the only center that had some kind of facility to help us to deal with the response at all. We only started with 30 beds at the facility, thanks to the support we had from the Chinese government. We had personnel from their staff that was supporting the military hospital at the time. Within the overarching policy environment of the national state public emergency, the Ministry of Health and Sanitation raised the public health alert to level 3, which requires the activation of the Public Health National Emergency Operations Center, which we then have at Cochrane. The creation of National COVID Response Governance Framework, populated by personnel from across government, private individuals and international advisors, is mainstream into this architecture to coordinate and deliver an effective response. All of this was put in place by a small team put together by His Excellency the President, and by mid-March we had a structure that was good enough to start the full response. Now, up until today, we have 3,932 cases, positive cases. And in this, the details is talking about 1,639 female, representing 41.6% of the total, 2,293 males, representing 58.4% of the total positive cases so far. Now, I don't know whether you have the same slides, whether they were distributed around, but we do have an EP update, a map showing volume and indicating the cases per district. And we all know as of today, Western area remains the center, the epicenter. With Western area urban still recording the highest, 2,244 up until today, followed very closely by Western area rural. And then we have two other districts that also have figures above 100, and that is Kenema district and Bo district, 133 and 129 respectively. The Western area remains the epicenter and a concern to all of us, but this is also the seat of power and has most of our own activities and offices. Let me briefly come to some of our successes recorded so far. I would like to give some details, but for the purpose of time, I'll maybe touch on the key ones of each of the key pillars of the response. Surveillance, we started with very, very low numbers of qualified in the surveillance pillar. But some of the successes they recorded is that they trained 4,000 additional case investigators and contact tracers. Thanks also to WHO and other partners that have been supporting the development of these capacities. They trained point of entry personnel on COVID-19 case detection across all our border entry points, the main one especially. And they provided a strategic plan for the response. They contributed a lot in that, including a transition plan. They also decentralized all their pillar activities to the districts. We are very much pleased with the laboratory successes. We started from near 3 laboratories conducting our tests. We now expanded it to 6 as of today. We consider that a very big success, considering the effort that needs to go into it, plus equipment as well. Again, we thank our international partners for supporting that effort. They've trained also 30 additional competent molecular scientists, thanks to the WHO and other partners for helping us achieve that. And particularly so, they've increased our daily testing, which was basically around 100 when we started in March last year. Now we're about 1,000 on a daily basis. Now there is also robust quality assurance with a 100% score in international proficiency testing through the WHO scale. That's another plus for the laboratory team. They are also preparing a second sequencing analysis capacity. We know that Sierra Leone has gone through a second phase already, and all by our advisors, we hope perhaps will not lead to a third phase as in other parts of East Africa recording currently. They've established linkages with international labs and collaboration with Africa CDC and WAPO. They've established real-time stock management system. All of this a plus for laboratory team. There are many other achievements and successes for the laboratory teams. and we want to thank them really for their efforts. They've been working around the clock in all facilities we have across the country, and for that His Excellency recognized their efforts 2-3 months ago and even gave them specific incentives for that hard work. On case management pillar, like I said in the beginning, we started with the only 30 beds capacity for the response. As we speak, we have 1,000 nationwide. That's a very huge leap. And today, out of that capacity, we are only occupying 2% of that, which means we must have been doing something good in the response. Only 2% of the 1,000 beds available are occupied. The 30 public hospital, which started with the 30, is now becoming critical care capacity, as critical care capacity has been developed at that particular center. Again, thanks to the international partners that are working with us at that center and other places.
Thank you very much, Brigadier. His Excellency the President, the Honorable Chief Minister, colleague ministers, distinguished guests, diplomats and friends in the assistance community. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today and to share with you some of the thinking that's going on in the Ministry of Health and Sanitation. I think as His Excellency referred much earlier, and as Brigadier Kelly also referred to some of these issues we're dealing with, we're responding to an outbreak here now, but it's also an opportunity to think ahead and see what legacies will be left behind to our robust healthcare system in Sierra Leone. I think having said that, it's really important to, even as we're forward-looking, to just see what we're dealing with right now. You have a Sierra Leone that after 2014 and 2015 is a very solid country that focuses on delivering adequate health care to our people. And in that spirit, we want to be sure that we're not only dealing with conditions that are happening right now, but we have the foresight to see what's in the horizon. Right now, we're dealing with COVID-19. We're also dealing with the potential threat of Ebola in Guinea. We're looking at polio issues, we're looking at yellow fever issues, we're looking at rabies issues, we're looking at Lassa fever. I think all of it is being managed by a very robust healthcare system that's trying to be as responsive as possible. And thanks to Your Excellency for your leadership in helping motivate and address in that area. As you know that in 2018, following the Ebola outbreak, there was a good Sierra Leonean partnership with others to look ahead. Instead of us responding to some of these outbreaks, could we get ahead of them? There was an active search for hemorrhagic fevers that nobody else had done anywhere in the world, but in Sierra Leone, in partnership with others, we were able to actively search and we were able to identify a new Bombali Ebola virus. We were able to see new Marburg strains as well, and discovered in different parts of the country. So even though they're not causing any illnesses today, what that tells us that there's potential in the future because we're interacting with these natural walls so closely. But being ahead of the game and preparing for us such that we're much more preemptive is the modus operandi of this country, and I think for that we should all be very proud. With the current situation, we learned from what happened in 2014 and 2015, and so when Guinea declared an Ebola outbreak in February 14, Sierra Leone and our neighbor Liberia immediately jumped into action, and we declared a public health emergency as well. And just following that, we have some clear objectives that we're working towards mitigating the fear of Ebola in Sierra Leone. Our number one priority right now is to help Guinea fight the virus. And so the President led a delegation to Guinea. We talked to our counterparts. We're really working very closely with international partners to ensure that we understand the epidemic in Guinea and contain it there. Our next major effort here is to ensure that Sierra Leone and Liberia are better prepared to make sure that we stop the introduction of this virus into our respective countries. And we're working very closely with Guinea on that. And the principal focus there is to deny access to this virus into our countries. And what we've done is, again, we have some really solid infrastructure to draw from. We have the district health management teams in all of the districts in Sierra Leone who are able to mobilize all of the district health management teams in all of the 10 bordering districts and actually pull everybody together to start thinking about preparedness and response. And in doing so, we looked at 3 major areas. First, looking at enhanced surveillance, ensuring that we look to see anything that looks like, that feels like, that tastes like, that smells like Ebola, we detect it right away and be able to test for it and contain it. And what that means is having a very strong relationship with the community, because this is not just a medical issue. The people who are actively involved, let them know that we're actively searching. And so we can stop traffic, we can stop people moving back and forth, but should in case they come through, if anybody is sick in your neighborhood, to alert the district management team, and they will be able to respond immediately. We're also making sure that we deploy lab capabilities to the forefront so that we have early detection and quick turnaround times. We've also mobilized all with the help of the Ministry of Local Government. We've mobilized all of the chiefs in all of these areas who are working with their local subjects to be partners with the Health Ministry to make sure that we're able to detect these cases early.
Ministers, development partners, colleagues in government. The fundamental underpinning structures for delivering a response have been the commitment on accountability and transparency. And that foundation of peace had captured international attention on how we deliver on the resources that are provided by government, but also our partners and our donors, both in forms of finances, but also in kind, through the supplies that we require to deliver the response. So His Excellency did ensure that we have that structure to support our COVID response, but also response for any epidemiology or epidemic request that we have going forward. And during COVID, an underpinning structure had been the task force as an oversight of the resources that we do receive, in ensuring that they approve the budgeting, but also the policy trust of our response, which is the strategy for responding to COVID, and ensuring that we account for the resources, we report on them regularly, do our procurement processes openly, and try and make there is public visibility of it, and open our books to the Supreme Agency of Government to ensure that we account for the resources that are provided to us. So that's the foundation of peace that has actually guided the way we have responded. It has been very slow to come out on stream, but I think we have a proper control over this with proper engagement with most of our partners. We did receive resources from government, and I thought I should just make that openly. And what we have done is we have published on the website of the Ministry of Finance all the resources that we have received and how we have expended. So MF.gov, the result holds what we have received since March up to December ending. And we commit to publish quarterly these reports and ensure that when it's an annual 12 months roundup of our exercises, we'll do a full report that we table in Parliament, and our books will be open to the auditor in Sierra Leone to come and ensure that we did not misuse of bank resources. So that's the foundational piece of the way that we have structured our response for COVID-19. So on receipts, I will just say, purely for the health aspect, because Ebola response is unique. We do have a POAP, which is the economic response, and that's managed by the Ministry of Finance. But for now, and that's not what we're talking about here today, not the economic response. But for now, the focus is on the health aspect of the response. Total resources that we received from all our partners in the government of Sierra Leone had come up to $167 billion, about $46 million into the response. And this covered not only resources from partners, but also resources that we generated doing lab tests at the airport, and then enforcement of fines. We did introduce fines as a way to ensure that we constrain people behavior to buy the COVID-19 protocols or codes. We have face masks for ensuring that you encourage people to do washing hands and social distancing. So we did mobilize few resources on those, and they are kept in escrow. We actually utilize them, we want to projectize those resources and ensure that they invest into extending our health system architecture. We will do relevant approvals or from the task force to be able to deploy those resources. Into those resources that came in, 423 billion were effectively deployed, and they went into various aspects of the response. First to behavioral management, about 38 billion. Into case management, 130 billion. This is basically to buying supplies, ensuring that we expand from 30 beds to 1,000 bed capabilities across the country, and ensuring that we have oxygen, full kits of oxygen in all the hospitals. We procure huge quantities of oxygen, full kits, and then have ventilators in the country. Although those, we still have to learn how to deploy them. Because they require special skills, so the case level in our country are not so extraordinary. So what we've been effectively using are those oxygen. So it became very useful to me. And then IPC materials are what we support case management as well. And so those resources are gone into buying supplies on top of the donations that we had. We did operational coordination that taken a lot of resources. That is 182 billion. This is about having mobility, but also establishing the structures across the country, decentralizing COVID interventions in all the 16 industries, devastating them, and ensuring that they have the relevant resources to run the day-to-day interventions and reduce the case levels in the country. We did spend on isolation and then quarantines for people who are detected to have come in contact with COVID. By providing food for them in their quarantine, but ensuring that we cut them and provide oversight that they don't escape or go out. So that we spent about 25 billion on that. And next year it's reaching out and tracing contact, about 3.7 billion. We've been spending on testing. We did have a lot of support from partners as donations for PCR tests. For a good part of our initial response, up to the point those tailed down, and then the government started procuring PCR kits ourselves, and that's what we are still doing. We spent up to 30.2 billion on that, bringing total spent to about 423 billion.
Chief Ministers and Ministers of Government, development partners, I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to give an overview of the plans of the Ministry of Health in collaboration with the partners to roll out vaccines across the country. Sierra Leone had already developed a comprehensive rollout plan for the deployment of vaccines, targeting people over the age of 18 years, and in total, about 5.8 million people are targeted for the whole rollout plan. So that will require close to about 10 million doses of vaccines in the long term. But it's now clear that we're not going to get the vaccines, all the vaccines that we require, to target all of the population. The vaccines are going to be coming in batches, and that's going to mean that we have to adapt our plan to address this reality. So far, we have received 200,000 doses of the Sanitation vaccine donated by the government of China, and we've also received 96,000 of the AstraZeneca vaccine from the COVAX facility. The COVAX facility has committed to provide vaccines to about 20% of the population of the country. But in the coming months, up to the month of May, they have committed 528,000 doses. So the 96,000 is basically the first consignment of the 528,000 doses that have been assigned in this first part of the year. So currently in total, we have About 290,000 doses of vaccines are available, including AstraZeneca and the Sanitation vaccine. And of course, it's very important that we roll out these vaccines in the coming weeks. Of course, we have now planned that there will be a symbolic launch for high-profile political leaders and particularly cabinet ministers and members of parliament on the 15th of March at State House. And during this launch, we are having a conservative target of 150 people that will be reached with the vaccines. So this launch will also be followed by a symbolic launch, of course, at the Miata Conference Hall, just as a follow-up, where that will happen about 12 noon, where we will now focus on the healthcare workers, just having a selected number of healthcare workers, even though we're prioritizing those that are over 60 years of age. Of course, vaccination for the rest of the country will continue from the 22nd of March, where all the target populations across the country will be reached. Each district will have 2 vaccination sites, and then we'll have 1 mobile vaccination team. So there will be 3 vaccination teams in every district. Of course, we will ensure that both of the vaccines that are now currently available are available in the vaccination sites, and we will use selection criteria to offer a particular vaccine to the beneficiaries. Because, for example, Sinopharm is not recommended above 60 years of age, so it's obvious that those that are above 60 years will offer them the AstraZeneca. For this initial rollout, we are targeting the healthcare workers, of course, our political leaders, social workers, teachers and lecturers, the military, the police, the customs and immigration workers, prison officers, fire force officers, and also people that are above 70 years of age. With the exception of health workers, for whom we will target all of them, these other categories will focus on people that are above 40 years of age for a start. Chief Minister, colleague ministers, excellencies, Ambassador, at this point that ends our own presentation. I would like to hand it back to you, Excellency. Thank you very much.
The holistic view of what we've been doing since the outbreak of coronavirus in Sierra Leone, and up to the Ebola that has started Guinea, and what we are doing to make sure that it is not introduced into Sierra Leone. Of course, now we have vaccines that we want to roll out, and that has been covered in this presentation. We may invite our partners in development to come as they get a response to be made from the presentations that we've had on the note. I don't know if in whichever order you want to come, but I'll make it voluntary so that if you have anything to say, you can indicate by showing your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. President, for this opportunity to dialogue on a very important health and development, the cluster of health and development issues, for which the first thing to say is to congratulate you and the government and the people of Sierra Leone for the success so far achieved. Firstly, in doing so well with first outbreak, and also doing quite well in dealing with the second surge, so to speak, and hopefully the successes that have been achieved will be built upon to prevent a third surge and enable this transition from emergency response to post-emergency and recovery. That is our hope, that's our desire, and that is what we wish to support at the United Nations. Recovering from COVID-19, in our view, is part and parcel of advancing Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development and the progress that can be very rapidly made in achieving the target set in the Medium-Term National Development Plan. The presentations today have been so informative and provide us with enough insights into what is to come, where the gaps are, and what needs to be done in the short, medium, and long term. And for this, we are truly grateful. The number of issues, we have been having a lot of conversations as development partners within our agencies, between agencies. First, on the prevention side, it is true that testing capacity has increased, but we are still significantly under-testing, and we do not really have a full picture of the exposure of the population to COVID-19. The testing by itself is of no real value if it is not linked with contact tracing and then isolation of contacts of index cases. So one of the observations that we have is the need to reboot and strengthen the surveillance system. Because without a real surveillance system, we do not have the evidence base for even launching significant boosting of testing. If we were to triple testing today, we would derive limited value from it without a robust surveillance system. And today in Sierra Leone, it's our observation that there are significant challenges with tracing and isolating, and that is limiting the prevention efforts. And knowing in terms of combating prevention measures, we see that there is the fatigue, and on top of fatigue, we have to deal with the pre-existing deniers, misinformation, the infodemic. So if we do have a surveillance system that is robust, that will help with combating some of that problem. Of course, we still need to do a lot of work, Excellency, on risk communication and social mobilization to deal with some of the issues that are at risk, which also have implications for the vaccine rollout. Because we do know that the epidemic extends to COVID-19 vaccines. And the survey that I have seen in Freetown suggests that more than half of Pretorians will not take the vaccine if they are offered the COVID-19 vaccine today. So the risk communication component is also very important. As we are way out of this, the Excellency ultimately is to reach herd immunity by vaccinating a very high proportion of the population. But before we get there, and scientists tell me, even after we get there, we will still need to ensure compliance with the basic prevention measures. Face mask wearing, safe physical distancing and hand washing. When we go around the country, many of the hand washing stations, for example, are broken down. We need to do something about that. We need to continue to ensure that there is, as one of my colleagues is tired of saying, there's modeling by leaders at every level of these prevention measures. Mr. President has been a fantastic model, but this needs to be spread out throughout every level of the leadership structure, starting from the community to the highest level. On the vaccines, we are happy that things are moving. The only issue that one might want to raise at this point to really address our mental is the potential for the pipeline of vaccines that will come in expand very rapidly. We know the EU has an initiative that is ongoing, and should those vaccines begin to flow into Syria, is the system ready to absorb them and be able to deliver and administer without creating any challenges.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. President. Good morning, Chief Ministers, colleagues, and senior government officials. Let me first appreciate, Mr. President, that we have this opportunity again. Indeed, we came together a year ago at the onset of the pandemic, and it's really very useful that we have this opportunity to update ourselves and to share or impression of what's happening, and also the way forward. So I really want to appreciate, I want to join the UNRC, who have made my job very easy, because he's basically shared already the views that I think all of us want to share. But I want to start by really commending yourself, Mr. President, for setting the right pace, showing the good example. Leadership in tackling this is absolutely critical, and you've shown that, and I agree with UNRC that it will be critical that all leaders in society follow your example in showing that leadership, in observing the basic principles of dealing with this pandemic. And I also really want to recognize the role played by the coordinator, NACOVAR coordinator. We benefited from regular engagement where we could talk freely and where we could give feedback on both sides, which has been really great and useful, I think, for ourselves, and I hope also for yourself. I cannot yet comment much on the new Minister of Health, but I think everybody will agree that what we heard today and the conversations I've had already with you so far gives us great confidence that both in dealing with the COVID pandemic and with the Ebola situation is going to be done in the most professional way possible. So I really want to also welcome you on behalf of the EU, and I'm sure my partners in shouldering this effort. It's great to have somebody of your caliber on board. I'm not going to get into how the EU has been supporting this, but I'm happy that we have been able to help both on the macro side with budget support, debt relief, and in a more down-to-earth side, particularly in the districts and also here in Freetown, where the epicenter was and is going to continue to be with the efforts in responding to the pandemic. And I think it's fair to say that we are all tired of this. I think all of us thought mid last year that by the end of last year all of this would be over. We continue as we have always done, but it's clear that this is not over, and I'm afraid that it's going to stay with us for quite a bit longer still than we wish. So this requires for all of us to remain focused and to continue to do the efforts which you have done very well from the start, and which I think as a global community we will really need to continue to do, despite the fact that we are tired. What I think is important is that this is clearly not just a health issue. We know what to do on the health, and it's the simple measures, I think, which are really the key. As the UNRC said very well, the testing, the contact tracing, the isolation, but also the very basic thing of everybody continuing to wear a face mask, wash our hands, keep our distance. This is the absolute basis that we have to continue to do. But it is also a livelihoods issue. And I don't think enough people here realize that. The longer this protracts and we do not all shoulder this effort, the more people are going to suffer on a very personal basis. And I think this has to be really part of the message also. I'm very happy to be in this next phase also now with the rollout of the vaccine. This is going to be a very critical additional effort. We will be happy to study this in more detail. I don't think today is the day that we need to give detailed feedback on your rollout plans. I'm sure there will be opportunity. It's very important that we can start that. We're very happy that we can also support your effort through the COVAX initiative, and we may have some additional resources in support of internationally approved vaccines that will be rolled out. So happy to look into this in detail, but just one thing that I want to reiterate what the UNRC already said, the communication around this and creating confidence on the part of the population by having full transparency about what is happening, what are the risks, what are the benefits, I think is absolutely critical in moving forward and making sure that enough people will be vaccinated for this to have an impact. And finally, because we also talked about Ebola, very happy to see, I mean, this is really, I think, we're benefiting from all the lessons learned that we had from a couple of years in tackling this hands-on in a very effective way. We're happy that we can support this also to the GSS effort for the Ebola, regional Ebola response, which is fully in line, Minister, with what you have said here. So I'm confident that this will not become another emergency here with the measures that you're taking now, and we will continue to support that.
Thank you, Mr. President, and your honorable ministers for this really important update and information on what the government of Sierra Leone has been doing. It has been really informative to kind of hear about your rollout plan and even some of the additional areas where I think you are looking for donor assistance, and I'll be happy to kind of convey a lot of that information back to my colleagues here as well as in Washington, so really appreciate that. And like the UNRC and the EU ambassador have both already pointed out, a big thank you and kudos to your leadership, as well as to the government's kind of quick response and actions, both on COVID as well as on kind of Ebola planning and preparedness with regards to the outbreak of the region. We really commend what the government has already done. Just to kind of highlight a few different things that we've been doing with the government of Sierra Leone. As we announced kind of on Monday evening when the COVAX vaccines came in, the U.S. has committed to providing $4 billion to Gavi and to the COVAX facility. And last week they did provide $2 billion to Gavi to start kind of providing that additional assistance on vaccines rollout. Obviously some of that will go to Sierra Leone and to Sierra Leone's vaccines as well. In addition to the crucial vaccine assistance, the U.S. government has contributed close to, I think, $13 million to Sierra Leone on COVID preparedness and response last year and thus far in 2021. The funding has supported a range of activities. In the health sector in particular, activities have ranged from surveillance to commodities to capacity building of health workers and to communities in infection prevention and control. In addition, the U.S. is implementing a substantive and expanding program across multiple development programs and sectors. But as the Minister of Health pointed out, one of the things that's so crucial is to be able to kind of continue to fund and support routine health services. So it's one of the areas that we've really focused on with regards to kind of our other COVID assistance over the last year. Just to touch very briefly on Ebola, I think as the EU ambassador has already pointed out, it's been really great to see how quick the government of Sierra Leone has gotten into action, in terms of both the visit to Guinea as well as working with Liberia. I think it really is about kind of the lessons learned from the 2014-2015 Ebola outbreak. Thus far through USAID and CDC, we've identified and are programming an additional $1.7 million for Ebola prevention and preparedness here in Sierra Leone, and working hard to program additional resources. This includes support for overall preparedness and response coordination, surveillance, lab, infection prevention and control, and Ebola vaccine introduction if needed. Hopefully people will need that. That's our hope with regards to everything else we're doing right now in terms of a lot of that surveillance and assistance. Just to conclude, Mr. President, the U.S. values our partnership with you and with Sierra Leone, and will continue to combat the global COVID pandemic together and strengthen preparedness and response for Ebola and other health crises as they come up. But we really appreciate our relationship with you and with the government.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Honourable Presidents, esteemed ministers from the Cabinet, members of the diplomatic corps of the state, all protocols observed. Thank you very much for the session today, Your Excellency, and for the brilliant, really informative presentations from your collective leadership team. I will echo all the words said by my esteemed colleagues in response, all of which we wholeheartedly support. I'll just make a couple of very short reflections before handing over. Michael, I pay absolute tribute to your leadership, to that of your key players in the macro the Ministry of Health and all the agencies who have performed a quite outstanding job over the past 12 months in exceptionally challenging circumstances. Not just in terms, of course, of the public health challenges that COVID has posed to Sierra Leone and all of our countries, but the wider economic and social impact it has obviously had across the board. And these are the challenges that you were right talking about today, along with the ministerial colleagues that we must now tackle collectively as we look ahead. I will not bore the audience or yourself with the role the UK has played global response through COVAX, through the world-leading scientific research around vaccines and everything else. I think that speaks for itself. But would echo everything my partners have said about our collective partnership and our collective endeavour in tackling the pandemic and its impact going forward. And I'll stress two or three things, if I may, Your Excellency. We are talking a lot today about processes, about logistics, about health response and everything else, the sort of the nuts and bolts of everything we do day to day. But behaviours sit at the epicentre of everything we do with global health. And I would like to emphasise the issues brought up by my colleagues previously, and indeed by the Minister of Health and others. But as we move forward and go to the next stage of this response, whether it's in relation to the vaccine rollout, whether it's in relation to the very innovative thinking that the Minister has spoken about building public health institutions and resilience that look forward and plan ahead, behaviours of individuals sit at the centre of tackling problems. And I urge you, as you've done so brilliantly throughout this pandemic, to continue to lead from the front, your cabinet members, your senior officials and public figures, to continue to display good public health behaviours, masking up, distancing, washing hands, and setting that example. This is not just an issue for Sierra Leone, if I speak frankly. It's an issue we face in all our countries day in and day out, and collectively it's the leadership from the top that makes the real difference. Allied to that, of course, and again, colleagues have mentioned this, communications. And this is a challenge again for everybody in this room, both here in Sierra Leone and further afield. Consistent, clear and concise communications, setting out the risks and what people need to do to their behaviours and their responses will remain a central part of the response. And of course, presenting them with scientific data that shows the impact, the positive impact, for example, of these behaviours and the vaccines will be crucially important in building public support. And we are working in close coordination with all of the donor partners and continue to be very active in that space with your ministry colleagues, national health and others, doing what we can to assist you with that to be well. The last point I'd like to raise reflects something that's already been spoken about by colleagues, and I'm sure others will reflect on before we wrap up. It is very interesting in the global media as we move through to the next phase of the COVID response, and we hope that we can ultimately see a light at the end of the tunnel as we hope the pandemic starts to subside. But global health isn't a traditional strategic political issue. Our government, my government, and indeed me as a pastor as an individual, do not see this as a competitive space. This is a space that has exemplified in the last 12 months how collaboration can work, working together with different partners, often where we disagree on political issues, but showing that by sharing information, by working together on vaccine rollouts, by focusing our efforts on working with the key institutions of state, we can make a collective difference. And I do think that is going to be one of the main strategic historical lessons of COVID. That ultimately, when it comes to global health issues, but also sustainable development, we cannot operate in isolation and think just bilaterally. We need to think multilaterally and collectively to take this forward and be a real success. So once again, thank you for your continued leadership on this issue, and thank you to your esteemed ministerial colleagues for their continued engagement. We are all its partners with the collective endeavour to defeat this pandemic and move forward and get back to focus on human capital development, economic growth, issues that I know are very deep and close to the heart of you and your colleagues, and we stand with you to work on this.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, Mr. President, Ministers and Deputy Ministers, members of Government and fellow members of the diplomatic community. Your Excellency, please allow me to give my ambassador's apologies. She is in Liberia this week on her other ambassadorial duties, so I'm here representing her. I'll just make some very brief remarks. I want to echo my colleagues' comments on, I suppose, how impressed we are and how we see the value of the work that you've done in responding both to the COVID-19 crisis and also in the preparatory work you've done very, very quickly and extremely efficiently in preparing for a possible issue around Ebola. In particular, I'm extremely pleased today to hear Minister Denny's remarks about the proactive work that you've done in identifying those potential outbreaks in the country. It's really, really encouraging to see that work and that evidence-based approach that you're encouraging and increasing in the country. Ireland has been pleased to contribute to the COVID-19 response and now to some of that other preparation work in a number of ways, and I won't need to go into them in detail. But I want to say that we stand ready to continue not just responding to COVID-19, but reacting and responding to any future crises that we might see in the country. We're firmly committed to that response, and also to ensuring that hopefully in the future we won't need to be so focused on response because we can prevent these crises from happening in the first instance. And also, if I could echo in particular the EU ambassador's comments that we're ready to contribute to the response to COVID-19 itself and also to the impact that has had and will have on the government and Sierra Leone's development goals. Finally, just a quick word I want to say on coordination. I really particularly welcome this opportunity, Your Excellency and Ministers, for us to meet together, as my colleague from the EU has said. It's extremely valuable for us to hear what you're doing and to share what we're all doing. And in particular, I want to say that our work as development partners and your work is at its best and its most efficient when we're coordinated. So we would welcome future opportunities to coordinate with you and to communicate and for you to share with us how best we can make our approaches and how we can be most effective in responding to COVID-19, in preventing and responding to Ebola, and also in contributing to your sustainable development goals in the round. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Mr. President, Honourable Chief Minister, Honourable Ministers, dear colleagues, distinguished senior officials, good morning. It's my honour to be invited to this very informative mission meeting. I should also join our colleagues in applauding Your Excellency, Mr. President, the Sierra Leone government and people for the strong leadership and the high degree of commitment, tenacity and resilience in fighting COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the achievements they have already made. And my congratulations to NACOVAC, the Ministry of Health and Sanitation, for the very impressive, effective work. But there are still challenges, as the Honourable Ministers previously said. But I believe that through continued hard work of the Sierra Leone government and the people, and with the active support of the international community, Sierra Leone will be able to end the pandemic at an early date and revitalize socio-economic development. The Chinese government and people stand in solidarity with Sierra Leone in the fight against the pandemic. At the initial stage of China's fight, we also got valuable support, political, moral support from Sierra Leone. China has provided about 9 rounds of essential medical supplies to Sierra Leone to support your fight, including the newly arrived 200,000 vials of COVID-19 vaccines. The donated Sinopharm vaccine is widely used in China and the world. And the safety and efficacy of that vaccine has been proven scientifically. So long as it is kept, stored, used, and delivered in that way, there won't be any big problem at all. The China's support to Sierra Leone in the latest socio-economic development has been forthcoming without being interrupted by the pandemic. For instance, the construction of several projects, human resources development, and technical cooperation in several fields. The Chinese side will continue to join hands with the Sierra Leone side in deepening our cooperation and work with other development partners in helping Sierra Leone with an early victory in the fight against the pandemic and also the prevention of the Ebola virus. China will also continue to provide support through COVAX to friendly countries, to all the countries that are of need, including Sierra Leone. I also agree with the previous speakers about the importance of keeping robust preventive measures against COVID-19, even if the vaccination is rolled out.
Your Excellency the President, Ambassador Gomes out of the country, he asked me to step in. Chief Minister, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Your Excellencies, colleagues, partners, I also would like to thank you all for this opportunity to get a briefing and to be part of a discussion about the state of the fight against the virus. We're now 1 year into the pandemic, and we've seen that thanks to your tight response, Sierra Leone could cope quite well compared with other countries with this pandemic. So time is a relevant factor. Time is the other enemy, not only the virus. So that's why, like Minister Dr. Dembe has pointed out before, acting is better than reacting. So 2018, we're already prepared for the future by setting up an agency. I would say that Germany has been committed to strengthening the Sierra Leone health system and its epidemic prevention since 2016. And I'm glad that the country can benefit from this during the COVID pandemic and the latest Ebola outbreak. The COVAX facility is one side, but the access to COVID-19 tools accelerator ACTA aims at developing diagnostics, therapeutics, and the vaccine is one point. And I'm also proud to say that with $2.5 billion, Germany is a major donor to this facility. Dr. Cisse has been pointing out that there's, with almost 300,000 vials, not very much doses available at the moment, but I think it's an advantage not to have too many doses at hand. It needs storage, distribution, and in the course of the next 2 months, there will be more than 400,000 vials coming into the country to help for the preventive measures. The commitment by COVAX to supply doses for 20% of the population, which is more than 3 million, for the double vaccination, is a commitment which is supplied by the end of this year. So our goal is that everyone in the world can have access to the required vaccine. That is what we mean when we say that the vaccine against COVID-19 must be a common global good. So we're doing this because we will only be safe when all of us are safe, all over the world. In the case of a free-for-all level of distribution, Germany and the EU might win in the short term thanks to our production capacities, but at the cost of the pandemic continuing to spread unchecked throughout the rest of the world. So this is why it is very important for us to support our partners, our partner countries in the fight against this pandemic. It won't be the last one, we can be for sure. So that is why the investment into infrastructure is very helpful. It will help us in the future as well.
Your Excellency, Ministers, UN resident coordinators, development partners, I don't want to miss this opportunity when His Excellency called me. I'm the newest kid on the block. Yours coming into the country barely a month. But I think I've expressed my views to colleagues here, those I met, including government officials. I have, in the past 11 years, I've been around in the region and I've traveled a bit. And I've said, and repeat, the efforts, the strategies you've put in place in this country to deal with COVID is very exemplary. And I think I'm not surprised that other countries are learning from Sierra Leone. Thanks to the good efforts of His Excellency, as colleagues have amply recognized, your government making sure that you deal with this virus. Maybe the experience, as colleagues have said, useful lessons have been learned from Ebola, which have been used in dealing with COVID. Hence, the excellent position you find yourselves. As colleagues, this is work in progress, and we are not sure when this is going to end. And I want you to continue the leadership and also the good strategies you've put in place to deal with this virus. On our part, as UNDP, will align ourselves with what RC has said and what other partners have said. We'll join up with all of them to support the efforts of your government in dealing with this as quickly as possible. Thank you very much for the opportunity, His Excellency.
Mayor, Chief Minister, honorable ministers, fellow government partners, government officials, distinguished guests. This is really a landmark occasion, marking a year since we actually met at our first development partner meeting on COVID. And I have to acknowledge the convening this meeting, but also for your leadership. This leadership has set the tone for leadership at all levels, across your cabinet, at NACOWA, but also at the different levels of the country, districts, etc. And I think we shouldn't take leadership for granted, because that leadership hasn't always been present across all of the countries in the globe. So I really just want to make an important point on that. And people pay when there's no leadership. They pay with their lives, they pay with in the pocket. It's at the time of last year ago's meeting, I committed the World Bank resources to support and walk this path with you. We've supported in the form of budget support. We've also realigned existing financial support to support the immediate needs. In the area of obviously health, we mobilized some new resources in education, but also in areas of agriculture, energy, to support to small farmers, support to SMEs, to deal with the immediate crisis. But in spite of this, the households have felt the impact, and the economy has also felt the impact. On the economic side, the economy has contracted in 2020 by 2.1%. This is actually a smaller contraction than was originally anticipated in October 2020 of about 3.1%. And we are happy to hear that we had overestimated the magnitude of the contraction. But what we all haven't fully captured is the magnitude of the impact at the household level. And the gains made in poverty reduction will be reversed. The gains made that the Ministry of Finance had made in fiscal consolidation will be slightly reversed as well. This is the impact on COVID. But you have set the tone so that we can see the country's recovery going forward. The government has had early successes, but with the spikes that we've seen in December and January, it's clear that this will not be a smooth recovery to zero. We always risk these spikes. And this is exactly why we need the vaccine. And so I really acknowledge the leadership also given by you to Minister Denby, to the planning that has gone into, that we've seen today. Just a few points on that. I'm taking of the budget gap that has been identified. And also, in response to the needs, the World Bank is committing additional $5 million to support specifically the vaccine rollout. This complements the other support on COVID, but specifically for the vaccine rollout. But coming back to that budget gap, not all resources are new. And resources will have to be repurposed from other originally intended uses. So I urge the planners of the budget to really look hard at whether everything is needed. That budget cap is too big to be able to fully fill. And we really need to go back to the numbers, tighten them up, so that we can maybe do that budget planning, not only because according to need, but also affordability. And so coming on the plan, I'd say maybe there should be a few scenarios based on resource availability. If you get everything, there you have your budget. But probably not. So there needs to be maybe a plan B and a plan C in terms of the magnitude of the resource envelope. So, and this also speaks to the issue of efficiency and value for money. And this is really what also translates into results. So I think this is equally important as it was in the COVID response.
All protocols duly observed. The first thing I want to do is to join colleagues and previous speakers to convey my sincere congratulations to you, Mr. President, and your leadership in this situation we are in and the fight we are all involved in. I do not want to use the opportunity to reiterate or go back to all the things people have said. We don't have all the time in the world. But there are one or two points that I would really want to use this opportunity to stress from the vantage position of what UNICEF has been doing to support the government in this fight. I think Excellency is aware that on the part of the UN and International Development Cooperation and Partners, UNICEF has been in the forefront of providing support to the government, particularly in the area of risk communication and social mobilization, which is an indispensable and very important part of the fight. One of the points that has been made here today very strongly is His Excellency's modeling of preventive behavior across society. I personally, at a meeting, I think last week, I made one point. I said, one of the most consistent people across all sectors and across all situations that has successfully modeled the behavior that should be put out, particularly in public, is His Excellency, Mr. President. And I think that was the meeting with General Country. The challenge before us, Excellency, colleagues, friends, is how we go forward from now to ensure that His Excellency's model behavior becomes something that is all pervasive in the society at large. And that is where we will need that very, very strong push. And I think Excellency's help in creating and pushing and helping us to push a strong framework for making this happen will be a key success factor as we move forward with respect to risk communication, social mobilization, not only with respect to COVID-19, but also with respect to Ebola. And as His Excellency may be aware, we are also fighting polio at this point in time. So we are fighting on multiple fronts. And as the Honorable Minister has mentioned, there are other areas that will crop up. So I just want to make that as my only point of emphasis, building on what our colleagues have said before that. Given what we have done so far under your leadership, and in concert with development partners, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that if we put our minds to it and we put our efforts together and we establish the clear framework for the cooperation, this will not be a difficult thing to achieve. And I look forward to being part of it, and I commit very, very strongly UNICEF to being part of this fight within the framework we've talked about as a member of the UN family.
President, Chief Minister, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, Ambassadors, the UN Resident Coordinator, senior government officials, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, WHO would like to recognize the strong and effective leadership of His Excellency. We also recognize the good coordination of the COVID-19 response in Sierra Leone. We in WHO have been able to document the experience, and we have presented it as one of the examples that other countries can follow. We've noted that the number of the infection rates and the number of deaths remained very low, and we commend you, Your Excellency, for this. We recognize all the achievements, and they were outlined by the NACOVAC coordinator, the Honorable Minister of Defense. While noting that we have made great strides, we also want to caution that we need to remain vigilant. As the resident coordinator mentioned, we need to continue strengthening testing, laboratory testing, contact tracing. We need to make sure that all the cases are tracked, traced, and receive the necessary treatment. We also have to strengthen the surveillance system. As WHO, we align ourselves with the vision of the Honorable Minister, in terms of providing support for preparedness and response to Ebola. We want to make sure that we prevent Ebola coming into the beautiful country of Sierra Leone. But if in the unlikely event that it comes, we stand ready again to provide support to the government.
I want to use this opportunity to thank our government partners for their contribution to this fight. Of course, as I said earlier, we are not entirely out of the woods as yet. We have a long way to go, but we will count on your support, and we've just from the presentation stated the challenges that we face and the challenges that we are still facing in rolling out and the vaccine, and also what remains to be done to really stay on top of the virus. We look up to you for your support, technical and otherwise, as you've been great coalition members in the fight against COVID in Sierra Leone. I also want to use this opportunity to say a big thank you to NACOVAC and the Health Ministry. The work is not yet finished, but so far you've done a great job, and I want to commend you for the job well done. Mr. Minister of Health, again, congratulations for joining the team. Yeah. Job is well cut out for you, and you have to get hit and running, because you came in with a new virus, famous again. So we will leave that to you. I think you have a pair of hands that we can rely on. So thank you all for coming, and we look forward to this cooperation.